So is this the first time we're actually appearing on camera? Because this is kind of creepy for anyone who's been listening to our last 5 podcasts.
It might be. I don't remember. I wonder if we match our voices to our looks and vice versa.
Well, I'm a little bright in here, so I'm squinty. But yeah, this is new for both of us. So, but we wanted to do this for our loyal listening audience. Today is the 4th of July, 2025. So we thought, let's not just give them a picture if they could stand it. Let's give them something that is so 4th of July-ish that they will remember it. Besides the fireworks going on in the background here. Let's just look at these for 1 second. How do we do that? There we go. Look at that. Da, 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 da,
Happy birthday, America.
Happy birthday. It's really No King's Day, isn't it?
Yes. Very
It's
good
the
point.
original No King's Day. I know they had that day a couple of weeks ago when Donald Trump had his military parade and the 250th anniversary of the Navy or the Army?
249th.
249th. Okay. Well, it's good celebration. Right. Good day for a parade.
But next year is
Sorry?
Next year is America's 250th birthday.
So that makes sense. So they had No King's Day, but this is the real No King's Day.
Well, this is the real No King's Manifesto. We're going to go over the Declaration of Independence. And
well, first of all, what does this day commemorate? Because listen, I was raised in the secular, free public school system in New York.
Okay. So what did you learn?
I consider myself a reasonably educated adult. I'd like to think that I'm, if not asking the questions that are authentic to my real curiosity, I'm asking questions on behalf of the average listener. So I don't think I'm any dumber or much smarter than anybody anywhere in this country.
Okay.
But I seriously don't know exactly what today commemorates besides a sale on washing machines at certain stores.
And 150 million hot dogs being eaten and fireworks going off, the fireworks industry getting like 80 or 90% of their total revenue today or for today.
Makes sense.
So the brief history of the Declaration of Independence is that there is a long series of communications going on among the colonies and between the colonies and the King of England and Parliament, as we were sort of arguing with them about what, in essence, were these what we call the intolerable acts, where they would put the squeeze to the colonies in order to ask for more money, and they would pass laws, and they would quarter troops in our houses to enforce those laws, and just they wanted money. The British wanted money because they feel that they had paid for our defense during what we call the French and Indian Wars, what many people call the 7 Years' War. But it was really a global world war between the Kingdom of England and the Kingdom of France. And the colonies were a theater of that war. This was in the 1860s. And, the 1760s. I have an audience member that was... that corrected me. You're absolutely right. In the 1760s. And then after that, they were like, hey, we just spent all this money. We want, you got to pay your fair share. And they came in and said, you want to buy playing cards, you pay a tax. You want to get you want to register your land, you pay a tax. You want to do stuff. They just started squeezing us for money. And the United States was like, we got some problems with that. And there's all sorts of discussion going on. And that discussion eventually led to something called the First Continental Congress in the summer of, it started in 1775, 76. And they started talking, and they sent the king petitions, and every colony had a group of representatives that would go and speak on behalf of the government of the colony, because the colonies were really the independent political entity. Virginia was its own independent political entity, and Massachusetts was a separate and unrelated political entity, except both were chartered by the King of England. The King of England said, I give this British group a permission to go do this thing. In Massachusetts, it was the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which was a private company. In Virginia, I think it was a royal colony. So there's complicated legal infrastructure around the colonies, but as the British government said, "Hey, pay your fair share," the colonies were like, "We're not really happy with how you're doing this." That's where you get things like no taxation without representation,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So there was discussion going on among the colonies. The southern colonies like Virginia and South Carolina were not too keen to go start a war, and the Massachusetts was very keen to start a war because they had British troops sitting in their towns and whatnot. And among all of this conversation, it finally came back that the king did not want to parley, that he did not want to talk. Right after sending the king a couple of messages, he came back and said, "Yeah, I'm totally willing to talk once you lay down your arms and submit to me. Then we can talk." And we have a couple of battles. We have the Lexington Concord and the Battle of Bunker Hill, and so the hot war sort of started. And even then, the southern colonies were like, "That's your war. Like, we don't want to do this. We want to bend over backwards to stay within the British protectorate," because England was the biggest, was the superpower of the world. I mean, it'd be like, Wyoming and Idaho going, "Yeah, screw you, America, we're leaving." Like, and sort of the world would look at you and go, "What are you doing?" Like,
So what actually took place today on
right, right,
July
right, right, right. So that's a good preamble. So finally, they said, "Okay, there's no more talking with the King of England. We're going to go our own way. We're gonna be independent. We're going to declare independence, and we're going to separate from the mother country." And John Adams and Jefferson and Franklin were charged with writing that declaration, writing that document that said, "Okay, we're done. We're going to leave." And that was presented to the Continental Congress on July 2nd of 1776. And it was fully adopted unanimously by every colony on July 4th. And then subsequent to July 4th, every colony got signatures between July 4th and sometime in August. So it was presented on July 2nd, and John Adams thought that would be our Independence Day when it was presented. And it turns out July 4th was what became our Declaration of Independence Day, because that's when the Continental Congress adopted it. And it's a fascinating document because it contains the seeds of our complaints against the British government and the King and Parliament, and the first sort of green shoots of what would become our Constitution. Right, the ideas encapsulated, the complaints that we have, sort of frame the future development of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and.
So the framework of our government, the organization of our system of government, is largely in reaction to what we like. We didn't want to be treated that way by England, so we're going to create something new and better that is largely in reaction to the way England treated us.
I would argue slightly differently. I think it's close, but England didn't really have a hand or a significant hand in the governing of the colonies for 100 to 200 years, right? They just sort of said, "Go form a colony, trade with us, pay us some stuff." And American governance sort of grew semi-independently. We could elect our own House of Burgesses. We could have our own customs. We could have our own stuff, right? Our own law. And that's why every colony had some sort of representative house. It would interact at some level with an appointed governor or an elected governor. Right? Remember, some of these colonies were private companies. And, some colonies were independence movements from those private companies, right? Rhode Island was a guy that got pissed off at how Massachusetts was being run, and went 50 to 100 miles south and created his own colony. So it's not like England was the dictatorial ruler and we were throwing them off. It was we were independent for 100 or 200 years, or semi-independent, and then England kind of tried to come in on top of that independence that somewhat existed, and we said okay, no, and declared full independence.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so when you look at the Declaration of Independence and you look at the Constitution, some of the stuff had existed since the 1500s or 1600s. Some of the stuff in there had already been in place and had been used to govern us. And that's why you'll see language like, as God and providence provide, right? Because we've been doing it for that long. To us, it's natural, where to them or to the British, it's unnatural. And we can get into that, into what we mean by that.
You have a little show and tell also, don't you?
Yeah, well, yeah, me personally, I think we should, I'm a textualist. Like, we should go through it and look at their language and see what they're talking about and try to understand it.
Well, let's just kind of frame, as you're doing that, the framework of this podcast itself is maybe a little increased appreciation of the day by discussing its origins, but B, what is the text of the Declaration?
What are the ideas? What are the core culture and ideas that these events are in and come out of and affect? Right? Because a lot of the times when we look at current events, we go, oh, it has to be this way. It's like, well, why? Like, what's the assumption behind a lot of these things? Like, right now, we assume the federal government does A, B, C, D, E, and F. I mean, the federal government does a lot. Mm. But if you look at the original documents, they never would have assumed that the federal government would have the role that it does, ever. And sort of, how do we get from point A to point B? Well, you can't really talk about how you get from point A to point B unless you understand what point A is. Like, where are we? What's going on? Make sense?
Perfect.
Okay. So this comes from archives.gov. So this is a transcript of the declaration from the government itself. This is the first two paragraphs most people know at some level, right? When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that have connected them with another, right? So we're declaring that we're dissolving our attachment to the British, and to assume among the powers of earth the separate and equal station. So we're saying we're going to be a country or a political entity just like you, England. Right? We're no longer subsidiary. We are just like you. To which, and this is interesting, the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. So they're saying,
wow,
from God,
go nuts with this if this was presented today, wouldn't they?
Exactly. Right? They saw this as divine providence, that we have the right to do this. The laws of nature and God's nature entitled us to do this. And they're just saying in the last bit, it is of decent respect that mankind that we should declare the reasons, right? We want you to understand exactly why we're doing what we're doing. We don't want any confusion as to what drove us to this point. So, and remember, this was unanimously adopted. So it's not like, well, in New York and Delaware and Maryland thought this, and the British and South Carolina and North Carolina and Georgia and Virginia thought that, and Massachusetts, and this is everybody's agreeing on exactly the same text, right? Mm-hmm. Think about where we are politically today. Could you ever imagine everybody in Congress agreeing to the same text?
No, and I wouldn't imagine the word God in any of the text either.
Right. And something of this monumental importance, right?
Okay. I like how it also, I appreciate as a storyteller how it's kind of like in story form. Not like here we further declare or whereas or any kind of proclamation, but
there's a little more legalese down there. Down right below. We'll get there. Okay.
But I like the introductory paragraph with the when in the course of human events. It's almost like this happens time and time again, and we're now documenting this occasion.
Right. And it kind of does, right? I mean, parts of the Roman Empire fell away, parts of the Greek Empire fell away. Right? Like, political relations are historically in flux. Otherwise we'd all be living under the Roman Empire or whatever.
Yeah.
So to keep going, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay. So this is a core idea of the American Revolution. And in it are three things that I think people miss, gloss over, don't appreciate, right? One is all men are created equal.
This was in a
Now,
time of slavery, though.
this was in a time of slavery,
So there's a
right?
question.
Well, but even during that time, those who held slaves, many of them understood the contradiction that they were living in. They understood that to make this statement and own slaves is a contradiction. And you can read Washington and you can read Jefferson say these things like, yeah, we know, right? We understand. And, but this flies directly in the face of how the British viewed the world, right? The British wouldn't say all men are created equal. It would take them a while to get there because they say, well, there's
The king is
kings.
divine.
There's the king's divine, and people should follow the king, right? So ideologically, this is a pretty radical statement,
Yeah.
and but that it's said that they are endowed by their creator, that they believe this under the rubric of all people are created by God and therefore are equal. It's different than God appointed me to be more powerful than you.
Yeah.
Do you see the difference? And it's a big difference. And this is one of the first times where this is put on paper and declared and agreed to. And that the second, that they have certain unalienable rights. You need to understand what they mean by that. What they mean is rights that you cannot give away.
Cannot give away or cannot be taken away?
Give away. People can try to take them away, but no matter what, you always have them.
Who's this document talking to?
Everybody. This is
Citizenry.
for, pardon me, yeah, this is for the citizenry. This is for the British. This is for anybody that wants to join us. This is for everybody. This is our declaration to the world of why we want to be independent.
Mm-hmm.
That we think everybody's equal, understanding there's contradiction with slavery. We get that. That there's a creator who created us as equal, and that we have rights that you cannot give away. And even if you try to take them, we always have them. And among them, not that these are the only rights, among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right?
You're not
Not
guaranteed happiness. You're allowed to pursue
right.
it.
You're allowed to pursue it.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting. Except if you're a slave.
Right. Again, they understand the contradiction. Right? And it takes the British and the Americans another 60 to 80 years to start resolving that conflict. Right? And it was right-wing religious nut jobs who ended slavery because they saw this and said, if we believe that everybody's created equally under God, we cannot enslave them. And it took them a while to get there. But the fact that it took them a while to get there shouldn't, in my mind, diminish the fact that they started. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a
Now
process.
watch. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Not God gives me the right to rule over you. Not God gives me the right to govern you.
Mm-hmm.
But that governments are the creation of man, and they derive their just power from the consent of the governed. Not because I'm appointed by God, not because I'm more powerful, but it is the consent of the governed that gives you legitimacy to govern me. So, how do we go from that to, well, I'm the scientific expert, do what I say, right? In 250 years. I'm trying to get back to the core idea. Consent of the governed is the absolute key for the legitimacy of the government.
Got it. Consent of the
Right?
governed. Yeah.
And that when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, consent of govern, unalienable rights, pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit and happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing in such a form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Like, if you're not taking care of me, I have the right to end you as a government and institute a new one. And that is my God given right.
It's pretty radical.
It's incredibly radical, right? These were the radical progressives of the day, right? And somehow the radical progressives of the day now say, well, the Constitution is an outmoded thing that we don't need and we should just throw it away or tear it up.
Very troubling.
Right. Well, which is why, we have very different views. Right? Prudence indeed will dictate the government's long established. Let's go here. Long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. They're saying, look, we're not like, hey, we don't like George, but it is important to do. Right? But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, it is their duty to throw off such a government. And hey, we've been really patient. We've suffered you. We've tried. And now it's time to say, hey, here's the list of crap you've done to us and why we're declaring independence. Again, this is the list of all the complaints. And you go through them. There's like 27, 28 of them, something like that.
Wow.
Maybe more. Right? So you've refused to give us new laws that are needed. That's number one. You've forbidden our governors to pass laws that are needed, and you've neglected our governance. You've treated us. You haven't let us govern ourselves, and you've not governed us. You refuse to pass laws unless we relinquish the right of representation. You won't. You want us to give up our right to consent to govern. You've called other legislative bodies at unusual places and trying to, have the appearance of governing us, but not really. Like, it'd be like the state of California saying, we're going to have our legislative assembly up in this campground near Wairika in the north. And if you're not there, too bad, despite everything going on in Sacramento. Oh, and you have to be there in an hour. You've dissolved our House of Representatives repeatedly. Now, this was one of my favorite terms, for opposing with manly firmness, right? His invasions on the rights of the people. So when you tried to do stuff and our representative said, no, you can't, you just push them aside, right? It'd be like if Trump did what everybody says he's doing and dissolved Congress and dissolved the Senate and didn't let them do anything. Right now, you're looking at this going, wow, I never knew that all of this was in here, right?
To be honest, yeah.
And you refused after you dissolved us to reform them. We can't cause others to be elected. We can't undo what you've done. You won't let us exercise our power, right? You've limited immigration.
Also, what's in the National Archives store? Like, what are they?
Oh, there's like paper copies of it, right? But
okay, just curious.
You've refusing to allow people to come and immigrate here. You've tried to choke us off from growth, things like that. You've destroyed the administration of justice by refusing our ability to have judges. So we have to go back to the governor, right? And you get to judge us. That's not really fair. You've only allowed judges that will do what you do.
This is quite a divorce document, huh? It's a
real
list of all the offensive actions.
But think about if these were if this was your perception, right? Like if you looked at the U.S. federal government and said, "Hey, the president won't, pass any laws. He won't let the governors pass any laws. He, refused for people to move around the country. He only allowed Congress to meet when he said he was going to meet, and made it really hard for them to get there. You won't let anybody else govern, right? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, if
Yeah.
this was what was going on in America by the federal government, yeah, you'd be like, screw this. We're going our own way, right?
Has our
Yeah,
government engaged in any? I mean, arguably engaged in any of this type of oppression
no,
against our people?
very, very well. Recently, no, but we can have a discussion about it in terms of states' rights a little later. But he has kept among us in times of peace standing armies. You've erected new offices and sent them. Imagine, Donald Trump sending, 1,000 new. Well, I mean, let's say they created a new office for taxation and just sent them into California and started taking taxes, that kind of thing. Now, like, this is a good key one for quartering large bodies of troops among us. Right? This is the Third Amendment. Why do we have the Third Amendment? Well, we complained about it. I mean, imagine the army saying, we don't have army bases. Everybody, hey, officers, just go pick a house and stay in it.
And kick everyone out?
No, they have to pay for it. They have to give you a room.
Hmm.
Right?
That'd be weird.
Yeah. Well, but that's how it used to be.
Yeah.
Or you got to let us, you got to let 3 tents show up in your backyard and you have to feed them. They have no other place to be. Right? And then having, sham trials when those people steal things from you and take, and are overly aggressive with your daughters and things like that. Not letting us have free trade. Right? I mean, think about this. In our in our Declaration of Independence is a complaint about free trade. So the idea of trade, the idea of free trade, the idea of capitalism goes back to our founding documents.
Yeah.
Right? This is taxation without representation, for depriving us in many cases the benefits of trial by jury. Now remember, trial by jury was codified in the Magna Carta in the 1100s. So we, as British citizens, as what we see as associated with the benefit of Britain, and 600, 700, 800 years of the right to being judged by our peers, are saying, why are you stopping us? Why aren't you letting us have that? So from our perspective, the king's a really not a good guy. Like, he's a total dictator. Now, this one's interesting. Most people don't get this. At the end of the French Indian War, the British took over New France, which was Canada, and they didn't combine them with the colonies. They just said, we're going to institute a new thing here, and we're not going to give you the charters. And Canada didn't have the same levels of freedom of self-rule that the colonies did. So we're saying, oh, look what you did to our neighbor. We don't want you to do that to us. Taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, right? So we had this semi-independent government with charters and things, and he just said, I'm taking it over, right? So one of the things to think about is, it's not like we had this consistent way of being ruled by England, and then finally after that we went, screw that. We had our way of being ruled by England. They changed the rules. We didn't like it, and we wanted to get back to more of what we wanted, of what we had for hundreds of years. He has not given us his protection, and in fact declared war against us. This is a reference to the battles in Boston. He has plundered our sea, ravished our coast, burned our towns, right? And he's bringing foreigners in to steal and to rule over us. And he's kidnapped our sailors and impressed them into his own service. And he's excited domestic insurrections by people. Right? This is a pretty big list, right?
Yeah.
So if this is how every colony perceived the king and the British government, you can see why we were like, yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a pretty exhaustive list. Yeah.
Yeah. And notice we also say very clearly In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress, and they've not been answered. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act may be defined a tyrant, and is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. You don't really think about the Declaration of Independence this way. Most people don't, right? They just don't. It's a really powerful document.
It is. It's pretty damning. A little embarrassing.
To whom? To us or to him?
To England.
Yeah.
Once this gets out, the rest of the world's like, ooh, look what England's been doing. I mean, they knew, but now they've been called out.
Right. Well, from a content standpoint, I agree. But think about the ideas that are under this. We are a free people. We have the right to rule ourselves. We are all created equal under God and our Creator. We have rights that nobody can take away and we can't give away. All of the statements I just made are radical statements for the time, right? The only place that comes close to having this at this time is, well, the two places would be the Federation of Swiss states and the Federation and Republic of Dutch city-states. But even there, they still had some king stuff. Really, the Swiss were the closest, and they waged a bloody war against the Habsburg Empire later to deal with it. We're throwing off the yoke of a system that we cannot even imagine existing today. Right? We talk about white privilege today. It is a fraction of 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 what it was. Because if you weren't born of the right aristocratic family in England, you were locked into your town and your job, and you couldn't do anything. As bad as people think America is or was, hundreds of thousands and millions of people from Europe were like, I need to get there. That's the land of freedom. So compared to what they had, we were a radically open society.
Wow. Yeah. I guess you put yourself in that time and place.
Right. Were we perfect? No. Were we as open as we are now? No. But the seeds of getting rid of slavery, the seeds of having everybody be part of the consent of the governed are planted here. Because without them here, you wouldn't have them later. You wouldn't have the amendment to allow women to vote. A recognition of, hey, when we say all men are created equal, we really mean all people. Right? It wasn't until around World War I that all free people were allowed to vote. Right? But you can't get from white landed gentry voting to everybody voting without the idea that all people are created equal. That without the idea that the consent of the governed mattered. And this is the big flag in history putting down saying, yeah, this is what we believe. And we're going to create a government. We are going to institute a government based on these ideals.
And that's what we have to be thankful for today.
And that's what we have to be thankful for today. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
And there's a lot more to unpack.
Yeah.
But that's the essence of the day. That's the essence of the birth of America.
Yep. That's also what makes America unique or nearly unique.
Yeah.
That we declared this to be our guiding principles and then instituted a government based on it.
Yeah.
And then when you go look at, say, the French Revolution, they have a different fraternité, égalité, what is it? Fraternité, brotherhood, égalité, and liberté. Right? Fraternité, égalité, and liberté. Their big three are brotherhood, liberty, and freedom. So not pursuit of happiness. Right? They have a different look at it. And that's why we hold things like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution as sacred and foundational documents, and that everything goes back to them. Like, what's the Constitution of England? They don't have one. Right? So judges can do, traditionally we do this, or things like that. And those of us that believe that these ideals are really, really important go back to the source text, because that's where the source idea comes from.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good start. If people have questions, why don't they, send them our way?
Yeah.
But we
Let me
got a
put up
good
the
day to
question email.
go enjoy swimming and hot dogs and hamburgers and chips. And, I hope everybody has a great 4th of July.
All right. So, yeah, the way to reach us is info@unpackedpodcast.com. We'll see your email. We'll, if you're
And
lucky, address your email.
either email you back or bring it up on the show.
Yeah. So, thanks for tuning in. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Hope you have a deeper appreciation of it as I do. And we'll continue on with unpacking more ideas as we go.
Awesome.
Catch you on the next one.